All right, good morning. Can you guys all see the screen okay?
Not really. Kind of off-centered. Maybe it's our thing.
I'm not sure how to make it better. Kendra, do you know how to?
No, I can see it just fine.
Okay.
That's good. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So good morning. We are going to talk about professional boundaries this morning, which I'm sure you guys are well versed in. I will skip the introductions because we already know each other. I am going to pull up, we have an assessment that we normally do during this training, and Kendra has emailed that to Samantha. So you guys can use that at your leisure. It is a good assessment activity. It's a good, just kind of to kind of let you know where you are with boundaries. But I wanted to pull the assessment up just as an introduction, starting off with our training. And I wanted to talk about a couple of the questions on here before we dive into the meat of the training, just to see kind of what you guys think about a couple of these. So let's start with number 1. Can you guys see the assessment?
It's too small for us to read.
Oh, no. Whoa. Is that any better?
No, the actual window that we see is really small.
Okay, so you can't see it, but we'll just talk if you guys could. And again, you'll have this assessment to do on your own. But I want to talk through a couple of these things because they're going to come up during the training and just kind of see. I guess first we can start off with, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're a pro at this, you probably could teach this training. How do you guys feel about boundaries? How comfortable are you about your own professional boundaries and how you work with the clients?
I feel confident.
So like a 10?
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, but
Okay. Anybody else?
I think I'm about an 8.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
I'd say we're at 7.
Okay. Awesome. So this will be an easy training. Well, I'm excited to learn from you guys as well. The first question gives a scenario that you're walking down the street with your significant other and you see one of your clients walking towards you. Do you, A, ignore them, B, make eye contact and see what they want to do, C, nod a brief hello to them, D, stop and chat with them, or E, stop them and introduce them to your significant other? What do you guys think about that?
I'd say B.
Okay, so you make eye contact and see what they want to do?
Yep.
Okay.
C. B or C.
Okay, not a brief hello. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yes, they don't really make that through
that line. I'm sorry, I'm looking at something. So yes, you guys are right. It would either be B or C. It also depends on your policy for the organization. So our kind of, protocol, the way that we do things is if we see one of our participants out in the community, we are not able to make the first connection with them, right? So it's up to them to either approach us, say hi, whatever that looks like. So it would be more like B, make eye contact to see what they would do. If they keep walking, we keep walking. Now, if they say hi, we can say hi, but it's a little bit crossing boundaries to stop and introduce them to your significant other, to talk about what you guys are out doing that day, all of those things. I will say for about the past 7 years, I've lived about 5 minutes away from our residential program. And so the Walmart I go to is also the Walmart they go to, the place where I get my nails done. Some of the girls get their nails done there. So it does, make a difference with the area of town that you live in and how close you are. But it's something to think about. What will you do when you see a participant out in public? It's also really important to talk to the participant about what that looks like. So I always make sure I tell the participants, hey, if we see each other out in public, here's what's going to happen. I don't want you to think I'm being rude if I just keep walking. Any questions about that? Okay. So I'm going to go on to question 4. One of the participants in the program asks you if you have a significant other and how many kids you have. Do you A, give a totally honest answer? B, tell them it's none of their business? C, acknowledge your situation without giving too much information? D, get out all your family photos to show them? Or E, start to talk about your partner, your lack of a partner, your love life, your sex life, et cetera, et cetera?
I personally would do C.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, this one depends on what your role is, right? So our therapist might be much less likely to give information about her personal life. She may be much less likely to do that than maybe one of our direct care coaches. So it definitely depends on what your role is. It depends on what your license says you can do. We've had a therapist here before that was married, but she never wore her wedding ring at work because she didn't want to disclose too much of her own personal life. And those were her boundaries. Anybody have any other thoughts about that? Okay. So I'm going to go to number 6. A client that you have been working with stops engaging with you and rejects all your attempts to support them. How do you feel? Do you feel A, sad, B, annoyed, C, disappointed, D, angry, or E, not bothered?
I'd probably feel C.
Disappointed. Okay. Because we're human. We're not robots, right? Anybody else have any thoughts? I have to be honest. I think I've felt all of these things from time to time when participants leave the program. It's important to really check yourself with your feelings, and if sad comes to mind, why am I sad? What did boundaries get crossed? Did I get too involved? Those kind of things. Let me see. There was one other one that I wanted to touch on really quick. Here we go. This is a good one. This is something to think about. A new client spontaneously gives you a hug at the end of a particularly positive session. How do you respond to the hug? Do you hug them back and tell them what a positive session it was? Do you let them hug you, but you don't really hug them back? Do you avoid the hug and tell them that it is inappropriate? Do you accept the hug and tell them that it is inappropriate? Or do you tell them to never touch you again?
I think it depends. Yeah.
What was that?
I think it depends.
Okay. What does it depend on?
Well, number one, probably policy. I mean, some places simply have COVID policies, right? You can't even touch each other, find each other. Or, if it's beneficial, I mean, it's hard to say, don't ever touch me again, or don't, you can say this isn't appropriate, but I'm very excited, and, for you or whatever. You wouldn't want to totally discount that, but you wouldn't want to encourage it necessarily either.
Yep, it's definitely something to think through, because you will get participants, and I'm sure those of you that worked in other residential programs, they'll come in for the hug before you even know what's going on. We do side hugs. So the full frontal hug, in my opinion, is never appropriate in a setting like this. You have clients that might be attracted to you, and so the full frontal hug will last a little longer than maybe it should. Or hugs are very intimate, and so some of our staff are not comfortable doing hugs at all. Some of our staff are okay with a side hug. It's important to have the conversation with the participant as well. Some of the participants will be more touchy-feely and trust you quicker than others. So definitely something to think about. How will I respond? Because there will be participants that, want to give you a hug. They want to show you their affection, things like that. Questions about that? Okay. We also, just to add to the physical touch, we do have just kind of a protocol that, we don't, and this is part of trauma-informed care as well. We won't ever touch anybody, even if it's on the shoulder, on the back, touching somebody's hand. Any kind of physical touch is never appropriate unless you ask for permission. Again, that's a big part of the trauma-informed care, but it's also boundaries. Do you mind if I touch you on your shoulder right here? Things like that. So you're always asking permission. The hard part is when it's coming from the participant. How do you respond? How do you react? Do you reciprocate? What does that look like? What could that mean for your relationship? So just some things to think through. So the definition from Belmont University, professional boundaries provide the framework for healthy relationships between helpers and their clients. They are the physical and emotional limits that protect the client's vulnerability and protect the staff from becoming over-involved. And I just want to take a minute. I have not always had good boundaries. I had to learn kind of the hard way. Initially, when I started working in the home as a coach, we did 4 days on and 3 days off. So I was here, like I slept here, I woke up here, I ate all my meals here for 4 days straight. I would get off work, I would come back on my day off, I would take the girls to church. I just wanted to save everybody. Well, obviously, I got burnt out pretty quickly from that and realized there was some things that I had to do to protect myself. I was never really off work. And I started to realize that something had to happen in me in order to protect myself, but also to model good boundaries and things for the participants. So I started learning more about boundaries, and I feel like I have a good balance of not super strict, but also I'm able to say my boundaries in a non-offensive way, being assertive and not aggressive. And make it very clear kind of, what my role is with the participants in the program, that I will always support them. We're not going to be friends. We're not going to hang out, things like that. And I can't see you guys, so if there's any questions or you have a comment, please just interrupt me and speak up, because I can't see you guys. All right, so we've got types of boundaries. So the obvious one is the physical boundary, right? Hugs, pats on the back, things of that nature. The second one is material boundaries. So receiving gifts from clients and or giving gifts to clients. Do you guys have a policy around this yet?
Yes.
Okay. What does it say?
If they want to, if advocate wants to give a gift, they'd have to go through the program director and kind of discuss from there.
Okay, awesome. I would strongly encourage all gifts to come from the organization and not an individual person. So that can be tough with budgeting and things like that, but and if you haven't already, I would encourage to look at how can you build in some kind of birthday, transition, those kind of big deal. How can we buy cake, and how can we get a little gift, something that she really enjoys, but that it comes from the organization. It doesn't come from a specific person. I also would encourage you to have a policy, if you don't already, about receiving gifts and giving gifts as a volunteer and what that looks like. Because it's two different things, but I think it's important to talk about that beforehand. There will be situations that come up that you haven't thought of, but for the most part, trying to think through, what does it look like? Because we do want to give gifts. We do want to have celebrations. The other thing to think of, and as a program, but also as an individual, is what is your response when a participant tries to give you a gift? Do you guys have policy around that yet, Samantha?
I believe so. It's going to be in our handbook. I can't think of the specifics off the top of my head. I know that we have guidelines on like prices, and we do have a volunteer gift guideline as well, but I'd have to go back and look at the specific details of it.
Okay. And there's different times of the year where gifts may make sense. Kind of the way that we handle because the participants are going to want to give you things. We kind of, as a general rule, ask that if a participant wants to give a gift to staff, that it is homemade, so they don't spend any money on it. Most times, if a participant wants to give a gift, it's usually like a picture or something they've put together. A lot of times they've used things here in the house to create those, like a homemade card or a homemade. So we try to avoid, the participants spending money on things for us. The other thing, my personal, just kind of procedure, is that anything that I receive homemade from a participant stays here at work. So it's on my desk, it's hung up on the wall by my desk, so they can see that I'm using it, but I don't take things home with me. So just a couple of things to think about with material boundaries. Then we have mental boundaries, right? So thinking about your clients when you're off is a really good example of that. Again, we're not robots. There has to be something that you do to check out and not be at work sometimes. And that's difficult, especially if you guys are starting off. We have not always had the best boundary policies, especially as a faith-based organization, right? God called me here and I'm going to love everybody and Jesus will give me the strength, right? That's great. and there has to be time off. You've got to be able to refresh, refill, have people pouring into you. You can't always be the one pouring into everybody else. The fourth type of boundary is emotional boundaries, over involvement. Maybe the participants have your personal phone number. Maybe you answer the phone all times of the day and night. You think about them all the time. Maybe we go back to the question I asked on the assessment. Maybe you are angry or sad if somebody doesn't want your help or doesn't want the services that you provide anymore. Those are all types of emotional boundaries. And then the last one is spiritual boundaries, right? So you're either trying to push your faith on the participants or you're trying to adopt their faith in an effort to connect with them differently or better or things like that. We do have, we're a faith-based organization. The participants have their own ideas about faith. We have had participants in the program who are Muslim. We had one young lady who was of the Moorish faith, and I did not know about that particular faith. And so I asked a lot of questions, and she was able to share things with me, and we connected through that, but I didn't adopt that. I didn't then become a Moor. And so just, again, some things to think about with boundaries. Any questions about any of those things? Okay. So there are 4 main boundary roles. The first one is called the compliant. So this person usually feels guilty, maybe feels controlled by others. They're challenged with setting boundaries. A lot of time, this person takes on way too much responsibility. They have a hard time saying no. The second type of boundary role is the non-responsive. So they set boundaries against the responsibility to love. So they have a hard time saying yes. They don't hear the needs of others. They're just kind of there. Usually the non-responsive has pretty strict boundaries, but not a lot of reasons for why those boundaries are that strict. The third type of boundary role is the avoidant. So these people set boundaries against receiving the care of others. The avoidant normally withdraws when they are in need. They fear confrontation, and they sometimes say no to the good things. The fourth type of boundary role is the controller. So these last 2 are pretty self-explanatory. Usually the controller aggressively or manipulatively violates the boundaries of others. They don't respect boundaries of others. They can't set boundaries for themselves. They have a hard time hearing no. And normally they blame others or circumstances for things that are going on with them. Do you guys see yourself in any of these 4 roles?
No, not really.
No?
No.
Okay. What role do you think our participants are going to fall into most often? There's probably 2.
The controller and the avoidant.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Maybe the controller and the avoidant.
Yes. Absolutely. Yep. And the controller is hard because they're not only going to violate your boundaries, they're going to violate the boundaries of other participants as well. Could turn into some bullying things, a lot of blame, never my fault, things like that. So why do we want to set professional boundaries, right? Why can't we just help everybody and work all the time and love everybody back to life. When we set professional boundaries, it provides limits, right? So we talked in the strength-based consequencing yesterday that setting limits is really, really important for the clients that we serve. A lot of times they've never had limits set. So it's really important that they can hear us model how to provide limits for people. It defines power, and I don't love that word, but there is a power differential between our participants and our staff. And there does need to be a line drawn what that power looks like. And power, I don't like the word, but that's the word I use. So if you don't define the power, they're going to have a hard time following guidelines. They're going to have a hard time following staff directives. They're going to have a hard time. The home may feel a little chaotic because there's not really one person or one set of staff people that are kind of in control. So that's a really important one. The responsibility to set professional boundaries is on us. It's not on the participant. It's not up to them for them to tell us what our boundaries are. Our boundaries stay pretty streamlined and standard no matter who the participant is, no matter what role they fall into. Our boundaries have to stay the same. Setting professional boundaries provides credibility and predictability. As much as the participants may say they don't want it, they crave structure. They want some predictability. They want to know that what you said yesterday is the same thing today. It also produces consistency and stability for the client, and it protects the client. I have done this training quite a bit, and I've talked to a lot of people about boundaries. A lot of people feel like not having boundaries is a better protection of the client, right? Because they need us. They need to know we're there. But I actually have found the exact opposite, that when there are clear boundaries, that protects the client way more than our boundaryless choices that we might make. Or being available all the time, honestly. That's not helpful for them. That doesn't teach them how to make decisions independently if somebody's always there all the time. And it's not realistic in real life. So what are some warning signs when you may have blurred the boundaries a little bit? Right? So you feel like you're the only one who understands the client. You will have participants a lot that will attempt to staff split. They will only talk to one person. They're not sharing anything with anybody. I'm only going to talk to Miss Samantha about this. I'm only going to talk to Miss Kendra about this. That is not healthy for them, and it's definitely not healthy if you feed into that. So every time they shut down and they'll only talk to you, and you're there every time. It's important for the staff to present as a team to the participants. So if you're feeling like you're the only one who can help, you're the only one that can save this girl, that is probably a warning sign that there has been some boundaries crossed. Accepting or giving gifts. We talked about that a little bit. Especially from a staff perspective, if you're getting a gift just for one person, all the other participants are going to wonder why they didn't get a gift too. That's a warning sign that there are probably some boundary lines that have been crossed. Another warning sign is if you are keeping secrets for the participants. We see this a lot with the coaches. So the coaches are there all the time. And so the girls are like, I need to tell you something, but please don't tell Miss Andrea, or please don't tell, our admissions coordinator, or, I don't want to get in trouble for this. Will you promise that you won't tell? And in an effort to build rapport, sometimes the coaches keep secrets for participants. And sometimes it's unknowingly. But one of the warning signs is definitely if you're keeping things that you know are helpful for the rest of the team to know, but you're keeping that to yourself, that's usually a warning sign. We encourage the coaches to let the participants know that they can't keep secrets. And if it's something they need to share, they're going to have to share it. Now, obviously, there is only one person that works in this particular program that can keep secrets for the participants. And who is that?
Therapist.
The therapist, yes. So we always encourage, if you have something that you don't want anybody else to know, the place to share that is in therapy with Miss Lauren. She's our therapist here. But any other thing that you say, we might share it with the rest of the team. So another warning sign is giving clients your personal contact info. This was one of my warning signs when I realized my boundaries were not super great. All the participants had my personal phone number because they needed to get in touch with me sometimes, right? Or they needed to call me. And if the staff wasn't available that was here, they needed to call me. I realized probably not as quickly as I should have, but that was not realistic. And that was a big warning sign that there had been some boundaries that were crossed. I actually changed my phone number and got a Google Voice. So we have, phones here at the house that the participants are able to contact the staff that's on duty 24 hours a day, any time of the day or night, because the staff is awake. And then it's up to the staff to contact me if they need to in an emergency situation. The Google Voice I use for graduates of our program or women who have left the program. But I'm also able to regulate that. I can turn it off when I'm not at work. I can send it straight to voicemail. So I would encourage you guys, if you haven't already, to think through who needs a work phone. Maybe nobody does. A lot of us at Wellspring have Google Voice that we use as our work number, but something to think about. Another warning sign, we've talked about this frequently, thinking about the clients when you aren't at work. I wonder how she's doing today. Gosh, I didn't sleep because I knew she had a hard day. Things like that. There are little, they may sound silly, but there's little things that I do when I leave work every day. As a it kind of like leaving work. So it's going to sound silly, but I roll my window down and I think through everything that I've taken on while I was at work. And then I gradually throw the things out the window as I'm going home. And I live further away now, which has been helpful for my mental and emotional boundaries. And then the next morning when I'm coming back, I roll my window down and I pick the things back up before I go in the parking lot. That sounds really silly, even me saying that out loud, but it does somehow work in my head. So I haven't forgotten about those things. I'm not avoiding those things, but I'm just not taking them home with me. And then I pick up my responsibilities when I come back to work the next morning. So you may want to think through little things you can do to check out, to turn your brain off, and to really take care of yourself while you're not at work. The other part of this, I think, too, is an on-call system. So for a lot of years, I was literally the only person on call all the time, 24 hours a day. I never really had a day off because I was always waiting. The phone might ring. So it might be helpful to create an on-call system where it's not the same person that's on call for emergencies all the time. And then another warning sign is excessive self-disclosure. And we'll talk about this in just a minute, but for those of us that have lived in the life, that have survived the life, for those of us that have significant trauma, maybe a family member has been in the life, anytime you're self-disclosing or talking about a personal issue or something that you've been through, I would really encourage you to ask yourself why you're sharing that with the participants. And sometimes we do need to self-disclose if it makes sense, if it will be helpful for the participant. But a lot of times I've found that when people self-disclose, they're looking to fill something in them, and they a lot of times don't realize it, but they're looking for some kind of validation, sometimes from the participants, or they share as a way to connect, right? So if the participants knew this about me, they might think that they could trust me more, or something like that. But excessive self-disclosure is definitely a warning sign that there's some boundary lines that have been crossed. Why do boundary issues occur? Well, sometimes there's an inability to differentiate the professional from the personal. So if you're a volunteer, that's hard. If maybe you work 2 jobs and both of them are in the helping profession, it's hard to figure out who you are outside of that role sometimes. It's important to figure out what's personal and what's professional. We'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. A lot of times the clients are attempting to have their personal needs met. So only things that they can fulfill in themselves, they're trying to have those needs met through the therapist or the client relationship. A lot of the women that come through the program, they live here up to 18 months. So we get pretty close and connected. And when they leave, sometimes we are the only people that they've connected with. And so it's important to help them connect with outside people, because we're not going to be able to be everything for everybody forever. But the clients will push the boundaries. So again, it's important for us to have our kind of what's okay and what's not okay as far as boundaries. Boundary issues occur because of the treatment environment and the agency standards. So that's why it's so important to have the policies. I'm so excited to hear that you guys have thought through this stuff already. I know of several agencies here in Georgia that they require their staff to give the clients their personal phone number. They don't provide work phones. That's setting those people up for a hard time if they're making you give your personal phone number. So that's another way that boundary issues can occur. And then the obvious one, our participants, a lot of times, they don't know what boundaries are. They've never heard of boundaries. Or maybe they've heard of boundaries and they're that controller and they push our boundaries on purpose. And that causes some issues to occur here in the residential setting. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. All right. So what is the difference between a professional relationship and a personal relationship? And this is pretty self-explanatory, but some of the things for me made me really think about some of my relationships. So the big difference, professional relationship normally is paid. You get paid to do your job, to come to work. A personal relationship, I don't get paid to hang out with my friends on the weekend. I don't get paid to go out to dinner, stuff like that. So the paid versus not paid is a big one. Again, obviously, if you're a volunteer, that is a little bit more cloudy. But for the purpose of this training, we're talking about you guys are paid positions, and a not paid personal relationship is different. Another difference is service-oriented versus social in nature. So service-oriented meaning there's maybe an agenda, there's a goal that you're trying to meet. There is, we're going to talk about budgeting this week, or we're going to talk about opening a bank account, or we're going to talk about your doctor's appointment, or there's a very specific kind of agenda. A personal relationship is social in nature. So how you doing? How was your day? And I'm not saying you can't do that in a professional relationship, but in a personal, non-professional relationship, it's very social. There's usually not an agenda going on to the next one. It's spontaneous. In a personal relationship, where in a professional relationship, it's very time and location limited. So there's a graduate of this program that frequently will reach me on my Google Voice and say, "Hey, I'm in Duluth. You want to have lunch today?" And I'm like, "No, we need to schedule these times, you know." And so, but if a friend calls and says, "Hey, I'm down the street. You want to have dinner tonight?" The chances are much more likely that I'm going to go have dinner with my friend, being that it's spontaneous, versus a professional relationship where it needs to stay time and location limited. We should never be inviting participants to our home. We have a volunteer policy that the volunteers are not able to have the participants in their home. We ask our volunteers when they meet off site with the participants that they meet in a public place. That's for the participants' safety as well as the volunteers' safety. So again, time and location limited versus spontaneous. The professional relationship, there's an asymmetry in power. And in a personal relationship, the power is shared. So a few years ago, when I started learning more about boundaries, I've never had like a friendship with any participants, but frequently the participants would say, "Miss Andrea, I can't wait till I get out of this program. We're gonna hang out and we're gonna do this." And you know, I'd have to say, "Well, I'm really sorry, but we're never gonna be friends." You know, I will always use the term supportive adult. I will always be a supportive adult in your life, but we can't be friends. And they'll be like, "What do you mean we can't be friends?" Well, there is a definite difference in what I know about you and what you know about me. And that's not really a friendship. So this difference is the power. There is a definite difference in power in a professional relationship. In a personal relationship, the power is shared. I know a lot about my friends, and my friends know a lot about me. It's not, one-sided. The professional relationship is focused on the client's needs, right? Again, this is about them. This is not about us. We should have a place where we can get our needs met outside of our work setting, whether that's receiving our own therapy, whether it's, attending support groups, if somebody's in recovery, attending NA or AA or whatever, but it's outside of your work day. When you're meeting with the clients, you have to focus on their needs, not yours. And the participants will try to focus it back on you, but you have to continue to point to them. Obviously, a personal relationship is focused on shared interests. The professional relationship is also very goal directed. Again, where there is a reason for our meeting. We have an agenda. There's goals. That doesn't mean it needs to be super like stuffy or strict or rigid, but there's definite goals. We have things that we want to accomplish during this meeting, and we have an hour that we're going to meet for. Where a personal relationship can be casual, there's no time limit, there's necessarily no agenda. So those are just a couple examples of the difference and how to ask yourself some questions about what the difference might be. So we talked a little bit about this already. So I shared with you guys earlier in the week that I have been through the program. All the participants, well, not right away, but most all of the participants learn at some point that I did graduate from the program and that I've spent some time in the life. They frequently ask me to share my story with them. And I have never shared my story with any of our participants. In my opinion, there is no value in that for them. There are times when I share things that I think will be helpful for them, but not in a detailed, traumatic way, right? I'm not sharing all the things that happened in the life or all the things that I've been through or what my drug of choice was or anything like that. But maybe they're dealing with an unhealthy family relationship, and they ask, like, how did you get through this? And, that might be helpful for them in that situation to hear how I moved through that. So I always ask myself, is this in the participant? Is this in the client's best interest? Is this going to be helpful for them? Or am I looking to fill something in me that needs to be filled outside of this setting? Again, whose needs are being served? Is this serving me or is this serving them? And these sometimes are hard questions, for me anyway. And then, will this have an impact on the services I'm delivering? Will this change our relationship in such a way that I'm no longer able to serve in the way I was serving before I disclosed this thing about myself? So just some things to think about as you're sharing personal information, past history. A lot of times people share, a lot of times people self-disclose in an effort to have the participant like know more about them so they can connect better. But sometimes it ends up turning around where all of a sudden you've shared something. So a few years ago, this is an example. A few years ago, my dad passed away, and I was at home when it happened. And so I, obviously wasn't at work for a week. And when I came back, I found out that one of the staff people had shared with the participants that my dad had passed away. And so the first day when I came back, it was like, oh my gosh, Miss Andrea, we've been praying for you all week. Are you okay? You're probably so sad. They had this big poster up for me. Welcome back. We missed you. All of a sudden at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden they're caring for me instead of me caring for them. Right. And so I had to pretty quickly put up some boundaries. Obviously, really appreciate this. I'm fine. I appreciate your prayers. Thank you so much. I have people in my life that are supporting me through this, things like that. But it just took a little bit for me to notice kind of the shift when all of a sudden now the participants are kind of caring for me, if you will. And so those are things to ask yourself. Is it going to impact the services I'm delivering? How could it impact the services I'm delivering? Questions about any of those things? Okay. So, and it sounds like you guys have done a good job of really being thoughtful about policies already. We talked about the gifts policy for your organization. Have you guys considered a social media policy?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Does it say that you should never be friends with participants on social media?
Can't be friends with participants on social media, and then also we just ask that nobody takes pictures at the facility. No pictures of the participants' faces. If you do take a picture, you're gonna have to fill out a photo release form and put it in their file if you intend to use it, and it only be used for the organization's purposes.
Awesome. Great. Okay. I would also consider, like I heard you say, using it for the organization's purposes. We never use pictures of faces while the participants are in our program. So we do have graduates speak from time to time, and obviously we get their consent to put anything on social media if their face is going to be shown. But also when we do those things, we don't include the whole name. We might create a fictitious name. We might use a first name. It depends on their level of comfort. But while they're in the program, their faces always have to be covered up. And any pictures taken of the participants must be taken on our organization phone. So we can't use our personal phones to take any pictures. There was one other thing. Oh, the other thing to consider is what will the response be? Because you will get the participants once they get access to social media. They'll find you and they'll send you a friend request. And so it's a good idea to just think through, well, what will I do? What will I say when I get this request? Do I just leave it sitting there? Do I explain that I'm not able to accept the friend request? Just some things to consider for you guys. And then job descriptions, employee responsibilities, creating clear roles and clear responsibilities. So again, different staff have different responsibilities and different roles and different, I think, for lack of a better term, like levels of boundaries. So again, the therapist has the highest level of boundaries because she's licensed and she takes that very seriously. The coaches spend a lot of time with the participants, so their boundaries are maybe a little bit different than what the therapists are. But it's really important to create those clear roles and clear responsibilities. It becomes difficult. We have this in one of our programs. It becomes difficult if the therapist all of a sudden is the only staff member covering the house, right? Because then the roles get a little bit cloudy. The responsibilities are a little bit cloudy. So, if the therapist's primary role is individual and group therapy, but now all of a sudden she's monitoring phone and computer time and eating dinner with the participants, those roles are going to be not as clear to her or to the participants. So it's really important to think through job descriptions, clear roles and responsibilities. So what are consequences of unhealthy professional boundaries? And we're about done, so if we could keep going instead of taking a little 5-minute break, is that okay with you guys?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So there are some consequences of unhealthy professional boundaries. These are pretty obvious, right? The client will become codependent on you and or your organization. That is not a good look because they will have a hard time figuring out how to move forward into independence. And we do that unknowingly a lot of the times, right? We want to give them everything and provide everything for them, but there has to be kind of a slow ending of that care, right? And a slow transition out of that and them into their own independent living situations. It could discourage clients from seeking help in the future. It could exacerbate mental health disorders in the client. What else? What other consequences of unhealthy professional boundaries can you guys think of? How can it affect you?
We get burnt out.
Absolutely. So you're not able to serve as many participants, right? What about maybe your family or your home life?
I'd say the more work we take home, the less, we could be present but unavailable at home. So it affects everything, every part of your life, your sleep.
Absolutely. 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 We want us to stay healthy so we can continue to do this work. Um, and I think it's harder for some than others to kind of turn off and be present at home and not be thinking about the participants. So in the last slide I have here is just, obviously there has to be balance. This little picture here, it's like, here, I've drawn this line. Please stay on that side of the line, sir. It doesn't have to be this rigid, as you guys already know. And some days are better than others. And honestly, if we're digging deep here, there are going to be some participants that are harder than others to create boundaries with. We've got our own stuff and our own trauma, and maybe a participant reminds us of our little sister or our niece, maybe our daughter. So sometimes it's harder than others. So it's important to always ask questions of yourself. Get your team's feedback too. Talk to your supervisor about what boundaries look like. If you're struggling in a certain area or you have questions about self-disclosure or anything, being able to talk to the team and really get feedback from everybody about what the best way to go about whatever it is, in the best interest of the participant and in order to keep yourself sane and healthy, is always important. What questions do you guys have?
I think we're good. Break time. We get to go. Weird. We take time? Yeah.
Sorry about that. I hung up on you guys. All right, I'm gonna stop recording.